Hey everyone, this is Aaron Danes. Today I'm going to go over with you guys about CSS measurement units, kind of go over what those are and kind of how to use them a little bit in CSS. So there's several that we're going to talk about today. We can't go through all of them, of course, there's quite a few of them, but let's get started. So first we'll talk about the absolute lengths. These are measurements that they're fixed lengths. When you use this in your CSS, then it's going to give you a specific size for each of those measurements. So we've got like cm for centimeters, mm millimeters, in for inches, px for pixel, pt for point, and pc for pica. So we'll go through a couple examples on some of these as well before I go into that. So pixel is like 1 px is equivalent to 1/96th of 1 inch, and then 1 point is equivalent to 1/72nd of 1 inch, and 1 pica is equivalent to 12 point. And then another note here is pixels are relative. So for like a lower resolution screen, then 1 pixel is going to be equivalent to 1 real pixel. But for high resolution screens, most of what we're using today, then 1 pixel is actually going to be equal 1 pixel is going to be multiple pixels on the screen because it's higher resolution, as well as when you print out an image or a page. So let's go look at some examples here. A lot of the examples we're going to look at are actually from the w3schools.com. They have a lot of great resources for learning about CSS and specifically about today the CSS unit. So some of the absolute lengths we'll look at real quick, a couple examples they give here. I like using this website to show some examples because you get to see the code and the page side by side to see what the code is. If you alter the code, you can see how that affects the page or the text or the layout of the page. So let's look at a centimeter example real quick. So right here they give us an example where heading 1 has a font size of 1.5 centimeters. So that's 1.5 true centimeters on the page. We could change that. If we change that, for instance, all the way up to 3 centimeters. Let's go ahead and change that. Oh, put that down there. 3 centimeters is going to make it quite a bit larger. So it's an actual measurement. That's why it's an absolute measurement unit. We can change the line height to 2 centimeters. It's going to make, and that was for H2. So that'll make that bigger. Oh, sorry, not line height. That's the H2. And if we change our line height, there we go. Change that to 2 centimeters. Makes the line bigger there. So there's an example in centimeters. We're not going to go through all of these, but just go through a couple here. 1 inch, once again, is 1 real inch. So this one is relevant in some cases, but others not as much. 1 inch is pretty large, so you can use fractions of an inch or decimals of an inch here. As you see here, like the font size for H2 is 1/2 inch. You change that to 0.1 of an inch. That's going to make it quite a bit smaller. Once again, an absolute measurement size there. Another one here, I thought this one was really cool, was picas. So 1 pica is 12 point. So like when you open up a Word document, usually 12 point font is the default size, or what you use for MLA format, things like that. So on a web page, 1 pica is equivalent to 12 point font. So on this page, we're looking at 4.5 pica here on heading 1. And the cool thing here is, like, for instance, 2 pica. If we change this one to 2 pica, that's going to be equivalent to 24 font. So 1 pica is 12 point, and 2 pica is 24 font, 3 pica double. So it just goes along that way. So pretty cool. 3 pica is going to be 36 font. 36 point font. So there's a good example there for pica. We can even look at pixels real quick. So 50 pixels for H1 here, 30 pixels for H2, and so on. So those can be adjusted. Pixels is a great one to use. You can be more precise with the numbers than things like inches and whatnot. So you can do like 35 pixels, change that slightly. You can even do 35.2 if we want. Make it just barely larger. So very flexible there. I like using pixels. But anyway, that's our absolute lengths there. At least several of them. So let's move forward here. We just get one over a couple examples once again. So like this is how it would be written. So H2 font size 1 centimeter. P for paragraph font size 15 point. H1 font size 4 PC. So this 4 PC or pica is equivalent to 48 point. So we'll go into some of our relative lengths, and you'll see these a lot as well. So EM is relative to the font size of an element. So for instance, 1.5 EM means 1.5 times the size of the current font. REM relative to font size of the root element, and then we go into a few others here. VW is relative to 1% of the width of the browser window size. VH is for the same thing but for the height. VMin is relative to 1% of browser window's smaller dimension, and then Vmax is for the larger dimension. And then of course, and we've gone over this in some of the class material, percent is relative to parent elements. You can always use percent in there. So let's go and take a look at some examples here. Some of these relative lengths, and they have several more here. I just picked some of the more common ones that we use more. So things like EX aren't going to be used as much. But EM, for example, you can pull that up here. Alright, so for instance in our paragraph, we've got 16 px or pixels set, and then our line height is 2 EM. So it's going to be 2 times that 16 pixels. So like if we change that to 1, it's going to have it just 1 of that 16 pixels in between there, and that's for the line height. If you change that to 0, they're going to be right on top of each other, pretty much, one on top of another. So if we go down here, you can see that again. So in our div, we've got the font size at 30 px, and then we've got inside that our span, the span element, or if you come down here, you see the span element is set to half EM or 0.5 EM. So if we were to alter that, make that 1 EM, that's going to be equivalent to that font size that we have set up here in the div. Change that to 2 EM, it's going to be larger. Go the opposite way. 0.2, it's going to be quite a bit smaller. So gives you some flexibility with that as well. So if you're wanting it relative to an element, then you're going to definitely want to use EM. Go through a couple others here. So we've got our VW. This is once again relative to the width of the window that you're using. So like for instance, it tells us here to resize the width of the browser to see how the font size of H1 changes. So right now the font size is set to 20 of the essentially the width of the window size. So if we were to make this smaller, then the text is going to change size as well, but the rest of it did not. So all the rest of this text is still the exact same size, but the H1 is relative to the window size. So that's a great one to use as well. It changes the font size depending on how large your window is. And then VH is going to do the same thing, but for the height, and a couple others along there. Let's go ahead and look at the percent one at the bottom. It's relative to the parent element for the percent. So like the parent element here is going to be the font size in body. We have it set at 16 pixels, 16 px. And then in our div, we've got the font size changed to 150%, and that's relative to what we've got here. So 150% of 16 px. So you can change that as well. If you were to change that to, for instance, 200%, it's going to be essentially double that. So we've got 16 px here and double that here. Another really flexible one, if you're wanting it relative to a certain element, you can make it half the size. So it's a great one. Those are some of the ones I wanted to go over with you guys here. Once again, this website, w3schools.com, is really great for learning more about coding. But yeah, that's that's a little bit more on the CSS measurement links that we're using in the course. I hope that helped a little bit, and we'll be able to apply that in the code we're doing. So some cool things just to mention on why we have these measurements, why they're set out this way. One thing, it allows customization. You can adapt your code to your situation, how you want the site set up. Do you want it set up more for relative to different elements, or relative to the screen width? Do you want it to set size? Do you always want a certain size to show 1/2 inch or a centimeter or things like that? And also streamlines it across sites, so different websites can use the same measurement units and have it support in multiple browsers. Looking forward to continually learning more from you guys throughout the rest of this course, your presentations. Once again, here's this source if you're wanting to take a look at that. Thanks, guys.